The Rock of Polynesia rises proud and tall against the crashing waves of the vast Pacific blue. Niue is one of the largest raised coral atolls in the world, its steep limestone cliffs providing a breathtaking introduction into a lush and rugged landscape. As with the rest of the Pacific, Niueans have a strong connection to the ocean. For generations, those that call these shores home have relied on the bounty of the sea for survival and recreation.
We have a son, he's only young, Ines' brother, Api, and he's a young fisherman and he's on canoe. Most important lesson of all, before the fisherman goes out, he has to understand the reading of the tide out into the ocean. That's including the shell picking people and the reef fishing people. It's very important that they understand and know how to read the tide. Our tide goes down in March. Then it comes back up in September, August, September, and start to get rough. But no, the tide now, it's still dry. It's very good for the shell pickers and the fishermen also. And the whale watchers, which is very good because they go out on the boat and the tide is very good. So we all benefit from this weather. But it's a sign of something has changed.
Against the scenic backdrop of Sir Robert's Wharf in the capital Alofi, the sole shipping port on the island, major construction is underway. Once completed, this impressive 3-meter-tall structure will provide critical weather and sea level information not only for Niue but the entire Pacific region. This tide gauge is part of the Australian government-funded Pacific Sea Level Monitoring Project. Operating since 1991, the project provides the longest continuous record of sea level and climate data in the Pacific. It is funded and maintained in partnership with the Australian Bureau of Meteorology's Climate and Ocean Support Program, Geoscience Australia, Pacific Island Governments and the Pacific Community SPC.
The Niue tide gauge is the 14th tide gauge to be constructed as part of the Pacific Sea Level Monitoring Project. The Niue had been clamoring for a tide gauge for many years, but because of the conditions there, because of the steep limestone cliffs and the absence of a fringing reef, there wasn't really a good location where one tide gauge could be located that wouldn't suffer from overtopping in cases of severe weather, but also that provided an area that would never run dry during low tide. As soon as the technology reached a level that we could accommodate, we looked into the option of doing radar sea level monitoring rather than acoustic sea level monitoring, which is what the 13 other stations that we have in the Pacific, they're monitoring using a sound signal that goes down to the top of the water and comes back up. But radar technology has improved significantly, so we looked into Niue. Instead of doing an acoustic monitor, we would have 2 simultaneously operating radar monitors, radar sensors that is, and those would provide a backup to one another. The Sir Robert's Wharf in Alofi is the only location for ships to bring goods on and off of Niue. So it's a very high traffic area, and it's important for any instrumentation that we would be located there to not interfere with that normal flow of traffic. We looked long and hard for a good location for the tide gauge. There were some false steps, but everyone is quite happy with the final location where it is now.
In terms of the benefits for Niue, they'll have a full weather station located here on the wharf, which will give wind speed, direction, barometric pressure, air temperature, water temperature, 3 different sea level sensors that we have as well. So that data will actually be going back to the Bureau of Meteorology in real time, and it will then be available on a public website which can be accessed by anybody in the Pacific. As well, Niue is getting what we call a local data display, which means that if the internet connection on Niue drops out during severe weather conditions, that the local intranet on the island itself, which is a fibre optic network being put in at the moment, will be able to take the data directly from our station through the Niue government network, and that will provide real-time data to the Met service and to the emergency services on the island so that they can get real-time data as well.
Currently, only 6 of us.
Niue's meteorology office keeps Niueans informed of the latest weather forecasts and tide predictions. Once the tide gauge is up and running, it will be able to provide real-time data, which will also be linked to the other tide gauges of other Pacific Island countries, allowing the user to see what is happening at any of the stations at a given time. For one man who has lobbied for the installation for over 20 years, this development has been a long time coming.
Met Service here is the focal point for receiving and disseminating of cyclone warnings, including tsunami warnings for the general public. So that is our main role. For the past years, we continue to get tide gauge calendars for Niue from Australia. And these were based on the data collected from the tide gauge in Tonga, Samoa and the Cook Islands, which is not very accurate. To justify this, I have some complaint from the locals in the past and current that the prediction was not accurate. The prediction was based on data recorded for other countries. If we look, for example, how far Tonga to Niue, how far Samoa to Niue, Cook Islands, it's quite a lot of big ocean in between. But having this tide gauge installed at our wharf, record the data, and predict the tide for Niue will be very, very accurate. Now, we are the first island in the Pacific to have this new tide gauge system, which includes the GPS, but the previous ones, they don't have those.
The information provided by the tide gauge not only informs the daily weather broadcasts and tide predictions, it also provides a solid foundation for the development of Niue's communities and industries.
The tide gauge is going to help us provide the data for our planning, for future planning, and also the policy direction that we're going, and not only policy but also the development aspirations, how to guide, we're using those data to inform our decisions. I looked at it as more from the information for food security, ensuring that the people will have access to food, and with the changes in the climate, what we used to know is not necessarily the same anymore. So we need this technology to help us, guide us. I think this is the opportunity for us to look at how we could utilize the technology, utilize the traditional knowledge, and utilizing the local knowledge, and how we could further develop Niue and ensure that it's resilient.
On 4th November 2015, Niue's tide gauge was officially launched by the Niuean government, Australia's Minister for International Development and the Pacific, the Honourable Stephen Chiobo, and the Pacific Community's Director General Dr. Colin Tukuitonga. The occasion was witnessed by Pacific Island leaders and development partners who were in Niue for SPC's 9th Governing Body Conference.
Changing climate patterns are causing not only sea level rise, but also an increase in number of extreme weather events like cyclones and tsunami. For the Pacific region, this is potentially a deadly combination of high water and wave activity from an increasing number of storms. If we had a tide gauge, we could have been better prepared for Cyclone Ofa that hits Niue in 1990, and again in 2004 with Cyclone Heta. Cyclone Heta was catastrophic. The sea came inland for more than 100 meters, flooding the western villages from Awasele to Hikutamaki, damaging homes and causing tragic loss of life. I wish to acknowledge Shonetasi Puretoa for his insistence during these years in trying to get this equipment in place before he goes to retirement.
SPC is not only a partner in the sea level monitoring project, but a key user of the data. I cannot overemphasize how important the data is from this network. In the past few years alone, we have used it to model tsunamis in Nuku'alofa, upgrade navigational charts in Port Vila and Luganville, develop pilot training simulation for Suva Harbour, model the effects of ocean inundation on groundwater in Kiribati, and to delimit maritime zones and boundaries across the region.
But I think ultimately we all recognise that through this investment, the Pacific community, Niue, Australia, all of us together will be better as a consequence of the structure that's been built and the information that we glean from it, and more importantly, the way in which we use that data to make sure we have a more resilient, more economically diverse, broader and deeper economic agenda throughout the Pacific.
I'm very proud of this great achievement. I'm happy that I will be leaving the service, and I hope whoever takes over from where I finish will continue the good work. The only message I have to tell our people of Niue is to look after the tide gauge. It's not a med-service equipment, it's the tide gauge for Niue, as long as it stays on the wharf for many, many years.